This is HOA nuisance files. The accusation was loud, and the evidence was louder. Karen screamed that she would make this a lean conversation if I kept denying it. Her voice echoed off the stucco walls of the mailbox corridor, and every neighbor within 50 feet turned to stare. I stood there holding my phone with the doorbell clip queued up, and she jabbed a finger at my chest hard enough that I took a step back. "Do not call your friend. Call the office," she snapped, and I could see the cheap plastic badge clipped to her tan blazer catching the Sacramento afternoon sun. That was the moment I knew this was not going to be a normal HOA complaint. This was war. My name is not important, but my address is everything in a place like Desert Palms Community Association. I drive rideshare for a living, which means I am home at weird hours and my driveway sees a lot of traffic. The HOA hates that. They hate my car being gone overnight. They hate my porch light being on at 4 in the morning. But what they really hate is that I have a home-based business license, and Kimberly Nash, the board treasurer, has been trying to get it revoked since the day I moved in. She calls it a zoning violation. I call it legal. The city agrees with me. That should have been the end of it, but Karen does not lose quietly. The theft accusation started 3 days earlier with a package photo. Someone sent a picture to the HOA email showing a torn Amazon mailer on a porch, and the photo clearly showed a distinctive welcome mat with a geometric pattern. Karen claimed it was my mat. She claimed the package was hers. She claimed I stole it, opened it, and ditched the mailer on my own porch because I am stupid, I guess. The problem was the mat was not mine. I have a plain black mat. But Karen does not care about facts. She cares about narrative. She called me at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was just getting home from a night shift, and my phone lit up with the HOA office number. I answered, and she did not even say hello. "I am speaking for the community," she said, "and I need you to return the toolkit case you took from the clubhouse storage closet." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. It was not a joke. She said a clerk at the hardware store confirmed her story. She said the clerk saw me walk out with a red case that matched the missing one. I told her I have never been to that hardware store. She said I was lying. She said she had a witness. She said if I did not return the case by noon, she would file a police report and start the lien process. I hung up and called the hardware store. The clerk I spoke to had no idea what I was talking about. He said no one from the HOA had called. He said they do not even track who buys what unless it is a special order. I asked him to email me a statement saying that. And he did. I saved it to a portable thumb drive along with everything else I was about to need. By noon, Karen was at my door. She did not knock. She rang the bell 6 times in a row, and when I opened it, she was holding a mesh evidence tote like it was a trophy. Inside the tote was a printed notice, a laminated policy sheet, and what looked like a complaint form. She shoved the notice at me and said I had 72 hours to return the stolen property, or she would suspend my access to the community amenities and pursue a lien for the replacement cost plus fees. I asked her what toolkit she was talking about. She said the red case from the storage closet. I said I have never been in the storage closet. She said my doorbell camera angle was illegal and I needed to delete the footage immediately, or she would add that to the complaint. That was when I knew she was framing me. The doorbell camera was the only thing that could prove I was not home when the theft happened, and she wanted it gone. I told her the camera was legal and I was not deleting anything. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that makes your stomach drop. "I am the reason this place stays safe," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her car, and I watched her pull out a portable printer from the trunk and print something right there in my driveway. She came back with a fresh notice. This one said I was in violation of the equipment placement policy, and I had 24 hours to reposition the camera or face a $50 daily fine. The original notice said 72 hours about the toolkit. This new one said 24 hours about the camera. She was stacking deadlines on purpose. I asked her which one I was supposed to handle first. She said both. Then she got in her car and left. I called my neighbor, Marcus. He lives 2 doors down and used to be on the HOA board until Karen ran a smear campaign against him last year. He kept every email, every notice, every recorded call. When I told him what was happening, he said the same thing happened to him. Karen accused him of stealing petty cash from the clubhouse fund. She had no proof, but she made enough noise that he resigned just to make it stop. He told me to document everything and not to delete anything. He also told me to check the key control log because Karen had access to every lock in the community, including the storage closet. The next morning, I went to the management office. The property manager, a woman named Diane, was behind the desk when I walked in. I told her I needed to see the key control log. She said that was internal documentation and I could not photograph it. I said I did not need to photograph it. I just needed to see who checked out the storage closet key on the day of the theft. She hesitated, then pulled up the log on her computer and turned the monitor just enough that I could see. Kimberly Nash checked out the key at 9 in the morning. She returned it at 11:30. The theft was reported at noon. I asked Diane if I could get a copy of that log entry. She said no. I asked if she could email it to me. She said no. I asked if she could at least confirm on the record that Karen had the key. She looked at me for a long time, then said she could not comment on personnel matters. I thanked her and left, but I made a note of the time and date on the log screen. I also made a note of the fact that the records custodian was refusing to cooperate, which meant Karen had leverage somewhere. That afternoon, Karen cornered me at the mailbox cluster. She did it during the peak pickup time when half the neighborhood was out grabbing their mail. She walked up behind me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You need to return what you stole, or I am calling the police right now." I turned around, and she was holding her phone up like she was about to dial. I said I did not steal anything. She said the package photo proves I did. I said the mat in the photo is not my mat. She said I swapped it out to cover my tracks. People were staring. A couple of them had their phones out. Karen smiled again, and I realized this was the whole point. She wanted witnesses. She wanted me to look guilty in front of everyone. I pulled out my phone and opened the doorbell clip. I turned the screen toward her and said this footage shows I was not home when the package was delivered. She did not even look at it. She said the angle was illegal and the footage was inadmissible. I said inadmissible to what? She said to any complaint or hearing. I said there was no hearing scheduled. She said there would be if I kept lying. Then she turned to the neighbors and said I am speaking for the community. And this man is a thief. One of the neighbors, an older guy named Paul, said out loud, "That is a pretty serious accusation." Karen snapped at him and said she had proof. Paul asked what proof. Karen said she did not have to explain herself to him. Then she walked away, still holding her phone up like she was about to call someone. I went home and pulled the full doorbell footage. The timestamp showed I left for work at 6:45 in the evening the day before the package photo was taken. I did not get home until 7:15 the next morning. The package in the photo was delivered at 8:30 that night according to the Amazon tracking. There was no way I could have stolen it because I was not there. But Karen did not care about the timeline. She cared about the photo of the mat, and she kept insisting it was mine. The vendor pressure started that night. I got a call from the dispatch office of the delivery company I contract with. The dispatcher said they received a complaint about my address being used for illegal activity. I asked who filed the complaint. She said it came through the HOA. I said the HOA does not have the authority to block my work deliveries. She said they were not blocking anything yet, but they were requesting verification that my business license was valid. I sent her a copy of the license. She said it would take a few days to process. I asked if that meant I could not accept deliveries in the meantime. She said it meant they would hold any flagged packages at the distribution center until the verification cleared. That was Karen. She was trying to get the vendor dispatcher to blacklist my address, and it was working. 2 days later, Karen tried to corner Marcus. He told me about it that same night. She showed up at his place during dinner and said she needed to talk to him about my behavior. Marcus said he told her he was not interested. She said she was conducting an informal survey of residents who had concerns about me. Marcus said he had no concerns. She said she heard he was helping me cover up the theft. Marcus said that was a lie. She said if he kept interfering, she would revisit his petty cash issue from last year. Marcus told her to leave, and she did, but not before she handed him a printed flyer that listed all the violations I was supposedly guilty of. The flyer had no signatures, no dates, and no HOA letterhead. It was just a list of accusations. Marcus took a picture of it and texted it to me. The next morning, I went back to the management office. This time I brought the doorbell footage on a tablet, the hardware store statement on the thumb drive, and a printed copy of the delivery timeline. Diane was not there. The assistant manager, a younger guy named Ryan, was covering the desk. I told him I needed to file a counter-complaint against Kimberly Nash for harassment and false accusations. He said he would take the documentation and forward it to Diane. I said I also needed to know if there was a process to appeal a fabricated violation notice. He said I would have to submit a written request to the board. I said the person I was complaining about was on the board. He said that was unfortunate, but the process was the process. I asked Ryan if he could at least confirm that Karen had checked out the storage key on the day of the theft. He said he could not confirm anything without Diane present. I said Diane already showed me the log. He said that did not mean he could comment on it. I thanked him and left, and I made a note that the management office was protecting Karen, probably because she controlled the vendor contracts and the budget. That afternoon, a tow truck showed up in my driveway. The driver knocked on my door and said he had an order to impound my car for unpaid fines. I said I did not have any unpaid fines. He showed me a work order with my address and my license plate number. The work order said I owed $200 in accumulated daily fines for equipment violations. I told him that was fake. He said he was just doing his job. I called the tow company directly and asked who authorized the order. They said it came through the HOA management office. I said the management office did not have the authority to tow my car without a hearing. They said the work order indicated a hearing had already occurred. I said no hearing occurred. They put me on hold. While I was on hold, Karen walked up my driveway. She had the mesh evidence towed again, and this time she was wearing the cheap plastic badge and a gray baseball cap with the hood of her blazer pulled over it. She said the tow was happening because I refused to comply with the violation notices. I said there was no legitimate violation. She said the board voted to escalate enforcement. I said, when did the board vote? She said last week. I said I was never notified of a vote. She said notification was sent to all residents. I said I never received anything. She said that was my problem, not hers. The tow truck driver got back on the line and said his supervisor wanted to talk to me. I handed Karen my phone and said, you talk to him. She took the phone and said, this is Kimberly Nash, treasurer of the Desert Palms Community Association, and this vehicle is in violation of multiple policies. The supervisor must have asked her something because she paused, then said the owner was notified and refused to comply. The supervisor said something else, and Karen said we have documentation. Then she handed the phone back to me, and the supervisor said he needed written authorization from the property owner before he could impound. I said I am the property owner. He said then they could not tow without a court order. Karen started yelling that the HOA had the authority. The supervisor said the HOA was not the owner. The tow driver packed up and left. Karen stood there in my driveway holding the mesh tote, and I could see her jaw working like she was grinding her teeth. She pulled out the portable printer again. This time she printed a notice on the spot that said I was being assessed an emergency fine for obstructing HOA enforcement. The fine was $500, due immediately. I said you cannot assess a fine without a hearing. She said the hearing happened last week. I said I was never notified. She said the notice was mailed. I said I never got it. She said I probably threw it away. Then she said if I did not pay by end of business today, she would file a lien on my property and block my access to the community amenities. I asked her how she planned to block my access. She said she would have the gate code changed and my credentials removed from the system. I said the gate staff would not do that without authorization. She said she was the authorization. I called Marcus again. He told me to go to the gate office immediately and talk to the staff before Karen could get there. I drove over, and the gate attendant, a woman named Lisa, was on duty. I told her what Karen said. Lisa said Karen had called earlier and demanded my access be suspended. Lisa said she told Karen that required written authorization from the property manager, not just the board treasurer. Karen said she would get the authorization. Lisa said she was still waiting for it. I asked Lisa if she could put a note in the system that any access changes for my address needed to be verified with me directly. Lisa said she could flag it, but if Karen showed up with a signed letter from Diane, she would have to comply. I thanked her and left, and I made a note that I had an extra witness who was willing to push back on Karen. At least for now. That night, I started going through the complaint forms Marcus had saved from his own fight with Karen last year. He had a folder full of them, and I noticed something strange. The wording on his complaints was almost identical to the wording on mine. The same phrases, the same sentence structures, the same accusation templates. I pulled up the violation notice Karen had given me about the doorbell camera and compared it to one of Marcus's notices about the petty cash. The formatting was identical. The footer was identical. Even the signature line was identical, except the date was different. Someone was mass-producing fake outrage, and that someone was Karen. I called Marcus and told him. He said he noticed the same thing last year but could not prove it because he did not have access to the HOA's document templates. I said I might be able to get them. He said how. I said the management office keeps digital copies of every form. If I could get Ryan to pull up a blank template, I could photograph it and compare it to the filled-in versions Karen was handing out. Marcus said that was risky. I said everything about this was risky. He said he would back me up if I needed a witness. I said I might need more than one. If you are enjoying this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more HOA drama you will not believe. The next morning, I went back to the management office with a plan. I brought the manila folder with the printed timeline and the thumb drive with all the evidence I had collected so far. Ryan was at the desk again. I told him I needed to file an official complaint against Kimberly Nash for harassment, falsifying HOA documents, and abusing her board position. He said that was a serious accusation. I said I had serious evidence. He said he would need to see it. I opened the folder and showed him the side-by-side comparison of the complaint forms. He stared at it for a long time, then said he could not comment on whether the forms were legitimate without Diane present. I said Diane was not going to help me because she was protecting Karen. He said he did not know what I wanted him to do. I said I wanted him to pull up a blank violation notice template so I could confirm the formatting. He said he could not do that without authorization. I was about to leave when Diane walked in. She saw me standing there with the folder open and asked what was going on. I told her I was filing a complaint against Kimberly Nash. She said the board would handle it internally. I said the board was the problem. She said if I had an issue with a board member, I needed to submit it in writing and wait for the next meeting. I said the next meeting was not for 3 weeks, and Karen was escalating every day. Diane said that was not her problem. I said Karen was using HOA resources to frame me for theft and filing fake violation notices. Diane said those were serious accusations and I needed proof. I handed her the folder. She flipped through it, and I watched her face change. She did not say anything, but I could see she was reading the side-by-side forms, and she was seeing what I was seeing. She closed the folder and handed it back to me. She said she would look into it. I said when. She said soon. I said I needed a timeline. She said she could not give me one. I said Karen was trying to block my deliveries, tow my car, and suspend my access, and I needed someone to stop her now. Diane said the best she could do was flag the issue and recommend the board review it at the next meeting. I said that was not good enough. She said it was all she could offer. I left, and I knew I was on my own. That afternoon, Karen called me from a blocked number. I answered, and she said she was calling on behalf of the HOA board to inform me that my home-based business license was under review by the city. I said the city already approved it. She said the HOA filed a zoning complaint. I said the HOA does not have the authority to revoke a city-issued license. She said they could request a review. I said on what grounds. She said the business was creating a nuisance. I said what nuisance. She said the traffic. I said the city does not consider rideshare traffic a nuisance. She said the HOA does. Then she hung up. I called the city planning department. The clerk I spoke to said there was no zoning complaint on file for my address. I asked her to send me a written confirmation. She did. I saved it to the thumb drive. Then I called Marcus and told him Karen was lying about the city complaint. He said that was her move. She makes threats that sound official, and most people do not have the time or the knowledge to verify them. He said the only way to stop her was to force a public confrontation where she could not control the narrative. I said I was working on that. He said to let him know when I was ready. He would be there. The vendor payment deadline hit 2 days later. Karen sent an email to every resident saying the HOA was behind on a critical vendor contract and needed to collect outstanding fines immediately to avoid a service interruption. The email said anyone with unpaid fines needed to pay by end of business that day or risk losing access to trash pickup, landscaping, and gate maintenance. The email was signed by her and included her title. It looked official. It was not. I called the vendor directly. The landscaping company said they had not received any communication from the HOA about late payments. I asked if there was an outstanding balance. They said no. I asked if Karen had called them recently. They said yes. She called yesterday asking them to stop servicing certain addresses until fines were paid. The vendor said they told her that was not how their contract worked. They only took direction from the property manager, not individual board members. I asked if they could email me a summary of that conversation. They said they could send me a copy of their contract terms. I said that would work. They sent it, and I saved it to the thumb drive. That night, Karen showed up at my door again. This time she had 2 other board members with her, a man named Greg and a woman named Stephanie. Greg did most of the talking. He said the board had reviewed my file and determined I was in violation of multiple policies. I said which policies? He said equipment placement, business use, and failure to respond to notices. I said I responded to every notice. He said not in writing. I said I did not need to respond in writing to notices that were fake. Stephanie said the notices were legitimate. I said they were not. She said the board voted to approve them. I said when. She said last month. I said I was never notified of that vote. Greg said notification was posted in the community newsletter. I said I never received a newsletter. He said it was emailed. I said I never got an email. Karen stepped forward and said I was lying, and the board had evidence I received every communication. I said, show me the evidence. She said it was confidential. I said that was convenient. Greg handed me a new notice. This one said I had 5 days to remove the doorbell camera, pay all outstanding fines, and cease operating my business from the property, or the HOA would file a lawsuit for breach of covenant. I asked him who drafted this notice. He said the board attorney. I said the HOA does not have a board attorney. He said they retained one last week. I said I wanted the attorney's contact information. He said it was confidential. I said this whole thing is fake. Stephanie said if I did not comply, they would have no choice but to pursue legal action. I said go ahead. Then I closed the door. I called Marcus and told him the board was backing Karen. He said that made sense. She controlled the budget, and the other board members were afraid of her. He said the only way to win was to bypass the board completely and go after the management company. I said Diane was not going to help. He said Diane might not have a choice if the evidence was public enough. I said I was working on making it public. He said to move fast because Karen was not going to stop. The twist came 3 days later. I was going through the vendor contract documents I had collected, and I noticed something in the payment ledger. The landscaping company had sent a copy of their billing history as part of the contract terms. The ledger showed monthly invoices going back 2 years. Most of the invoices were paid on time, but 6 invoices over the past year were marked as disputed, and all 6 disputes were filed by Kimberly Nash. The disputes claimed the vendor had not completed the work. The vendor had responded each time with photo documentation showing the work was completed. The disputes were eventually resolved, but the vendor noted in the ledger that the disputes had delayed payment by an average of 30 days each time. I called the vendor and asked about the disputes. The manager I spoke to said Karen had a pattern of filing disputes to delay payments, then using the delayed payments as leverage to renegotiate the contract terms. He said it was technically legal but extremely unethical, and they were considering dropping the HOA as a client because of it. I asked if he would be willing to provide a statement about Karen's behavior. He said he would need to check with his legal team first. I said I understood. He called me back an hour later and said his legal team approved a written statement as long as it was only used for HOA internal purposes and not published publicly. I said that worked. He emailed me the statement, and I saved it to the thumb drive. That same day, I got a call from Lisa at the gate office. She said Karen had shown up with a letter from Diane authorizing my access suspension. Lisa said the letter looked legitimate, but something felt off about it. I asked what felt off. She said the signature did not match the other signatures she had seen from Diane. I told her to hold the letter and not process the suspension until I could verify it with Diane directly. Lisa said she would try, but if Karen pushed hard enough, she might have to comply. I thanked her and immediately drove to the management office. Diane was at the desk when I walked in. I asked her if she signed a letter authorizing my access suspension. She said no. I told her Karen was at the gate office right now with a letter that had her signature on it. Diane's face went pale. She said she never signed any such letter. I said I needed her to go to the gate office with me and confirm that in front of Lisa. She hesitated, then said she would call Lisa instead. I said that was not good enough. I needed her to do it in person so there was no ambiguity. She finally agreed, and we drove over together. When we got to the gate office, Karen was still there. She was standing at the counter arguing with Lisa. Lisa was holding the letter and saying she needed verification. Karen was saying the letter was verified. Diane walked in, and Karen went quiet. Diane asked to see the letter. Lisa handed it to her. Diane looked at it for about 5 seconds, then said, "This is not my signature." Karen said it was a scanned signature from the system. Diane said the system does not have her signature on file because she signs everything by hand. Karen said the letter was legitimate. Diane said it was not, and if Karen tried to use a forged document again, she would file a police report. Karen grabbed the letter, shoved it in her mesh evidence tote, and walked out. Lisa looked at me and said I dodged a bullet. I said I was not done yet. Diane said she was going to recommend the board remove Karen from her treasurer position. I said the board was not going to do that because they were afraid of her. Diane said she would do what she could. I said I needed more than that. She said she could not promise anything. I thanked her and left, and I made a note that I now had a witness who saw Karen try to use a forged document. The final confrontation happened 3 days later at a grocery store parking lot. I was loading groceries into my car when Karen pulled up next to me. She got out and walked over. She said we needed to talk. I said I had nothing to say to her. She said the board was moving forward with the lawsuit. I said go ahead. She said I was making this harder than it needed to be. I said I was not the one making anything hard. She said if I just admitted I took the toolkit and paid the fine, this would all go away. I said I did not take the toolkit. She said the evidence said otherwise. I said show me the evidence. She opened her mesh evidence tote and pulled out a printed photo. It was the same package photo from the beginning, the one with the mat. I said that mat is not mine. She said it was. I said prove it. She said she did not have to prove anything. Then she pulled out her phone and said she was calling a vendor dispatcher to report me for operating an illegal business. I pulled out my tablet and opened the doorbell clip. I turned the screen toward her and said this footage shows I was not home when the package was delivered. She said the footage was fake. I said it was time-stamped. She said I edited it. I said you cannot edit a timestamp on live cloud footage. She said I was lying. Then I opened the hardware store statement and showed it to her. I said the clerk you claimed confirmed your story says he never spoke to anyone from the HOA. She said the clerk was lying. I said everyone is lying except you. She said yes. By now, a small crowd had gathered. People were stopping to watch. Karen noticed and started to back toward her car. I said I also have the vendor payment ledger showing you filed 6 fake disputes to delay payments, and I have a written statement from the landscaping company about your behavior. Her face changed. She said that was confidential. I said it was not. She said I had no right to contact the vendors. I said I had every right. Then I pulled up the key control log screenshot I had taken with my phone at the management office. I said you checked out the storage key on the day of the theft, and you returned it 30 minutes before the theft was reported. She said that did not prove anything. I said it proved you had access. She said half the board had access. I said, but you are the only one who filed a theft report. A man in the crowd said out loud, "That sounds pretty bad." Karen spun around and said this was a private conversation. The man said it was happening in a public parking lot. Another person said if she had proof she should show it. Karen said she did not have to show anything to anyone. Then, she reached into her mesh evidence tote and pulled out a portable printer. She tried to print another notice right there in the parking lot, but the printer jammed. She shook it, and the paper tray fell out and scattered blank sheets across the pavement. Someone laughed. Karen bent down to pick up the sheets, and I turned the tablet toward the crowd and said this footage proves I did not steal anything. Several people leaned in to look. Karen stood up and screamed that I was harassing her. I said I was defending myself. She said she was going to have me arrested. I said go ahead. That was when Marcus showed up. He must have been shopping at the same store because he walked over and said he saw the whole thing. He told Karen she needed to stop, or he would file a harassment complaint with the sheriff. Karen said he had no standing. Marcus said he was a resident and a witness. Then, Lisa from the gate office walked over. She said she was off duty, but she saw what happened, and Karen needed to leave. Karen said Lisa had no authority. Lisa said she had a phone and she was about to call the non-emergency line. Karen grabbed her mesh tote, got in her car, and drove off. The crowd dispersed. Marcus asked if I was okay. I said I was better than okay. 2 days later, Diane called me. She said the board had reviewed the evidence I submitted, including the vendor statement, the key control log screenshot, and the forged access letter. She said the board voted to issue a written correction retracting the theft accusation and removing all related fines and notices from my account. She said Kimberly Nash was being removed from the treasurer position and would no longer have access to vendor contacts, the key control system, or any enforcement authority. She said the HOA was also implementing a new policy requiring all violation notices to be reviewed by the property manager before being issued to residents. I asked what would happen to Karen. Diane said the board was recommending she resign from the board entirely, and if she did not resign, they would pursue removal through a special election. I asked if the HOA would be issuing a public apology. Diane said the board agreed to send a written apology to all residents explaining the situation and the corrective actions taken. The written apology went out a week later. It did not name Karen directly, but it was clear enough that everyone knew what happened. The apology said the board had discovered irregularities in the enforcement process and had taken steps to ensure it would not happen again. It said any residents who had been unfairly targeted were encouraged to contact the management office for a review of their files. It said the HOA was committed to transparency and accountability. It was everything I wanted, and it was in writing. Marcus called me the day the apology went out. He said Karen was moving out. He said a moving truck was parked in her driveway, and she was loading boxes. I drove over to see for myself. Sure enough, the truck was there, and Karen was carrying boxes from her garage. She saw me pull up and stopped. She did not say anything. She just stared. I waved. She went back inside. A few minutes later, she came out with another box, and I saw her mesh evidence tote sitting on top of it. She loaded the box into the truck and walked back to the garage. That was the last time I saw her. The follow-up happened about a month later. The HOA hired a forensic accountant to review the community budget. The accountant found multiple discrepancies in the petty cash records, including 6 withdrawals that were never documented or reconciled. The withdrawals matched the timeline of the vendor payment disputes. The accountant also found that Karen had checked out the storage key 14 times over the past year, but only 7 of those checkouts were tied to approved board activities. The other 7 were unexplained. The accountant recommended the HOA file a formal complaint with the district attorney. The board voted to do it. I do not know what happened to Karen after that. I heard from Marcus that she moved to a different city and was no longer involved in any HOA. I also heard that the district attorney opened an investigation, but I never saw any charges filed. What I do know is that the HOA amended its bylaws to include stricter oversight of board members, and Diane stayed on as property manager with a renewed commitment to transparency. The clubhouse storage key was replaced with a digital lock that required photo ID for every access. The vendor contracts were renegotiated to include anti-retaliation clauses, and the HOA started holding quarterly open forums where residents could ask questions and review financials. The tow yard policy that required owner authorization exposed Karen's bluff. The HOA's vendor demanded proper documentation and stopped taking her calls. Karen was ordered to stop contacting me directly. The same complaint template appearing in multiple files proved someone was mass-producing fake outrage. And that someone was Karen. A stash container was opened in the management office records room during a board audit, and inside were blank violation notices, pre-signed by Karen, with fill-in-the-blank sections for names and addresses. Karen could not explain it. The board removed her that day. I kept the thumb drive. I kept the manila folder. I kept every email, every notice, and every recording. I also kept the tiny flashlight I used to point at the camera lens the day I showed the doorbell footage to the crowd at the grocery store. It sits on my desk now as a reminder that the truth does not care how loud someone yells. Desert Palms is quieter now. The new treasurer is a retired accountant who actually knows how to read a ledger. The board meetings are open to residents, and the minutes are posted online. The gate staff got a raise. The vendors got paid on time. And I still drive rideshare, still run my home-based business, and still have my doorbell camera aimed at my porch. No one has complained. I am glad you tuned in.